The moment Elena walked into that company dinner wearing that emerald dress, I knew my carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. For 8 months, I'd been hiding the most intense connection of my life, smiling politely at corporate events while pretending the woman across the table was just my boss's wife and nothing more. But tonight, with the candlelight reflecting in her dark eyes and that knowing smile playing at her lips, I realized our secret was about to become everyone's business. If you've ever had to hide the person you love most in plain sight, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what happened that night changed everything. My name is Morgan Hayes, and I'm a senior marketing director at Catalyst Media, one of the top advertising firms in Chicago. I worked my ass off to get here. At 31 years old, I'd climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination, late nights, and an unhealthy addiction to espresso. My boss, Elena Chen, was a brilliant executive who built the company from nothing. He was demanding, visionary, and completely oblivious to the fact that I'd fallen desperately in love with his wife. Elena Chen was supposed to be off limits in every possible way. She was married. She was my boss's wife. She was 15 years older than me. She was straight, or at least I thought she was until that autumn evening when everything changed. I first met Elena at a company fundraiser 9 months ago. Richard introduced us casually, the way you introduce someone to hundreds of people at these events. Morgan, this is my wife Elena. Elena, Morgan is our rising star in the marketing department. Standard corporate pleasantries. I shook her hand, felt an unexpected jolt of electricity, and told myself I was imagining things. But Elena didn't let go right away. Her hand lingered in mine just a fraction too long, her brown eyes searching my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. It's wonderful to meet you, Morgan. Richard talks about you constantly. I'd love to hear more about your work sometime. I'd like that, I managed to say, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. That should have been the end of it. A polite exchange between strangers at a corporate event. But 2 weeks later, Elena showed up at the office with lunch for Richard, who was in back-to-back meetings. His assistant asked if I could entertain her until he was free, and suddenly I was sitting across from Elena Chen in the conference room, trying to make small talk while every cell in my body buzzed with awareness. Tell me about yourself, Elena said, leaning forward with genuine interest. Beyond the corporate bio, who is Morgan Hayes when she's not being a marketing director? I should have kept it professional. I should have talked about the weather or the latest campaign. Instead, I found myself telling her about my photography hobby, my obsession with old bookstores, my complicated relationship with my conservative family who still hadn't fully accepted that I was gay. That must be lonely, Elena said softly, feeling like you can't be fully yourself with the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. Sometimes, I admitted. But you build your own family, you know? Find people who see you for who you really are. I do know. Something in her voice made me look up, and I saw vulnerability in her expression that I hadn't expected. I spent most of my life being who everyone expected me to be. The dutiful daughter, the perfect wife, the gracious hostess. Sometimes, I wonder who I might have been if I'd been brave enough to explore certain parts of myself when I was younger. The air between us shifted. I recognized something in her words, in the way she was looking at me. But before I could respond, Richard burst into the conference room, full of apologies and charm, and the moment dissolved. After that, Elena started finding reasons to stop by the office. She'd bring Richard lunch, ask my opinion on art for their new house, invite me to gallery openings under the guise of networking. We developed a friendship that felt dangerous and intoxicating. We'd text each other random thoughts throughout the day, share book recommendations, meet for coffee on Saturday mornings when Richard was golfing. I told myself it was innocent. Just 2 women becoming friends. But I was lying to myself and I knew it. The shift happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon 4 months ago. Elena invited me to her art studio, a converted loft space downtown where she worked on her paintings. Richard traveled constantly for business, and she'd mentioned feeling isolated when he was gone. I told myself I was just being a good friend, keeping her company. Her studio was breathtaking, full of abstract paintings in deep blues and purples, canvases that seemed to pulse with emotion. Elena was standing in front of a half-finished piece, paint smudged on her hands and a streak of cobalt blue across her cheek. "This is incredible," I said, genuinely awed by her talent. "Why don't you show these?" "Richard thinks it's a hobby," she said quietly. "Something to keep me occupied while he builds his empire. He doesn't understand that this is the only place I feel truly alive." I walked closer, studying the painting. It was a woman underwater, surrounded by darkness but reaching toward light. "It's powerful. It feels like you're painting something deeply personal." "I'm painting what it feels like to be drowning while everyone thinks you're swimming." Elena turned to look at me, and there were tears in her eyes. "I'm painting what it feels like to want something you can't have." "What do you want?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Elena stepped closer. "You know what I want, Morgan. I think you've known for a while now." My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. "Elena, you're married. You're my boss's wife. This is impossible." "I know." She reached up, her paint-stained fingers trembling as they touched my cheek. "But that doesn't change how I feel. That doesn't change the fact that I think about you constantly, that I make excuses to see you, that being around you makes me feel more alive than I've felt in 20 years of marriage. This could ruin everything," I said, even as I leaned into her touch. "Your marriage, my career, Richard's trust in both of us. I know that too." Her thumb traced my jawline. "Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll never mention it again. We'll go back to being friends, and I'll bury this feeling like I've buried every other part of myself that didn't fit the life I chose." I couldn't tell her that, because I felt it too, this magnetic pull between us that had been building for months. "I feel it," I admitted. "God help me, Elena, I feel it so much it terrifies me." When she kissed me, it felt like everything I'd been afraid to want my entire life. Her lips were soft and desperate, tasting like coffee and possibility. I kissed her back with months of pent-up longing, my hands tangling in her hair while paint transferred from her skin to mine. We pulled apart, both breathing hard, the enormity of what we'd done settling over us. "What do we do now?" I asked. "I don't know," Elena said honestly. "But I know I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't go back to sleep walking through my life." That's how the affair started. We were careful, painfully so. We'd meet at her studio when Richard traveled, at my apartment when he worked late, in hotel rooms in suburbs where no one from our world would recognize us. We lived in stolen moments and secret texts, always looking over our shoulders, always aware that discovery would destroy everything. The guilt ate at me constantly. Richard was a good man, if somewhat distant and career-obsessed. He didn't deserve this betrayal. Every time I sat in a meeting with him, every time he praised my work or asked my opinion, the weight of what Elena and I were doing pressed down on my chest like a physical force. But then I'd be with Elena listening to her laugh freely for the first time watching her paint, without the weight of expectations crushing her creativity. Feeling her body against mine in the darkness, and I'd tell myself that this thing between us was worth the risk. That we'd find a way to make it right. We talked about her leaving Richard, about building a life together where we didn't have to hide. But Elena was terrified. She'd been with Richard since college, had built her entire identity around being his wife. Her wealthy family was traditional and would be scandalized by divorce, let alone by her coming out as queer in her mid-40s. And there was the company to consider, the optics of the CEO's wife leaving him for a female employee. "I need time," she'd say, and I'd nod understanding even as my heart broke a little more each time. Then came the annual company dinner. The big formal affair where Richard showcased Catalyst Media's success to clients and investors. I'd been dreading it for weeks, knowing I'd have to watch. Elena played the perfect wife while pretending she meant nothing more to me than a pleasant acquaintance. Elena arrived looking devastating in that emerald dress, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the light. She smiled at Richard, played her role perfectly, making small talk with clients and charming investors. But every so often, her eyes would find mine across the room, and I'd see everything we couldn't say written in her gaze. Dinner was torture. I sat 3 seats down from them, making conversation with the CFO while hyper-aware of every move Elena made. Every time Richard touched her hand or leaned in to whisper something. My girlfriend of 2 months, Claire, sat next to me looking bored. I'd been dating her to maintain appearances, which was its own level of horrible, and I planned to end things after the dinner. Halfway through the meal, Richard stood to make a toast. I want to thank everyone for another incredible year. Catalyst Media's success is because of brilliant people like all of you. And I want to especially thank my wife Elena, who has supported me through every late night and weekend working. Elena, you're my rock. Everyone applauded. Elena smiled graciously, but I saw the sadness in her eyes, the resignation. This was her life, being thanked for standing beside someone rather than being recognized for who she was in her own right. Then Richard dropped the bomb. Elena and I have some news to share. After 20 years in Chicago, we've decided to relocate to our New York office. It's time for new challenges, and Elena has always wanted to live in Manhattan. We'll be moving next month. The room erupted in congratulations and surprise. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Elena's eyes found mine across the table, and I saw my own shock and devastation reflected back at me. She hadn't known. Richard had made this decision without consulting her, just announced their future like it was a foregone conclusion. I excused myself from the table, mumbling something about needing air. I made it to the venue's terrace before the tears started falling. This was it. Elena would move to New York, stay trapped in her marriage, and I'd lose the only person who'd ever made me feel truly seen. Morgan. I turned to find Elena standing in the doorway, her wrap pulled tight around her shoulders against the October chill. You didn't know, I said. I had no idea. She crossed the terrace to me. He's been planning this for months, apparently. Thought he'd surprise me. What are you going to do? Elena looked out at the Chicago skyline, the city lights reflected in her eyes. When she turned back to me, something had shifted in her expression. I'm going to tell him. What? Tonight. I'm going to tell Richard everything. About us, about who I really am, about the fact that I can't keep living a lie. Her hands cupped my face. I love you, Morgan. I'm in love with you. And I'm done hiding it. I'm done letting fear make my decisions. Elena, think about what you're saying. Your marriage, your family, the scandal ... double quotes. I've thought about nothing else for months. She kissed me, right there on the terrace where anyone could see. I'm 46 years old, and I've spent my entire life being who everyone else needed me to be. I'm 46 years old, and I've spent my entire life being who everyone else needed me to be. You make me feel alive. You see me. And I'd rather face scandal and judgment and my family's disappointment than spend one more day pretending you not the love of my life. What if he fires me? What if this destroys your relationship with your family? Then we deal with it together. She smiled through tears. Isn't that what you said to me once? That you build your own family with people who see you for who you really are. Well, I see you, Morgan. And I'm choosing you. We went back inside together, hand in hand, and I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. Richard stood near the bar, laughing with clients, completely unaware that his world was about to shift. Elena squeezed my hand once, then walked over to him. I watched her whisper something in his ear, watched his smile fade as she led him toward a private room off the main hall. The next hour was the longest of my life. I sat alone in the lobby, my phone clutched in my hand, waiting. Claire had left in confusion. Other dinner guests filtered out, full of wine and satisfaction. And then Elena emerged, her face streaked with tears but her shoulders back, her head high. Hi. It's done, she said simply. How did he take it? Badly. Angrily. He called me names I won't repeat. She sat beside me, exhausted but somehow lighter. He wants a divorce. He wants you to resign. He's humiliated and hurt, and he has every right to be. I destroyed his life tonight. We'll figure it out, I said, taking her hand. I'll find another job. You'll find a good lawyer. We'll get through this. Together? She asked, vulnerability shining in her eyes. Together. I promised. That was 3 weeks ago. Richard filed for divorce immediately. I resigned from Catalyst Media the next day before he could fire me. Elena's family reacted exactly as she feared, her mother hanging up on her, her father sending lawyers instead of sympathy. The gossip spread through Chicago's corporate world like wildfire. I lost some friends. Elena lost more. But we gained each other. Fully, honestly, without hiding. Elena's showing her paintings next month at a gallery in Pilsen. They're raw and beautiful and completely her own. I'm freelancing, taking on marketing projects I actually care about instead of chasing the corporate ladder. We're broke compared to what Elena had before, living in my small apartment instead of the mansion in Lincoln Park. And we're happy. Genuinely. Freely happy in a way neither of us has ever been. I won't lie and say it's been easy. The judgment is real. The financial stress is real. The loss of relationships we both valued is real. But so is this love, this partnership, this life we're building together on our own terms. Elena's painting right now in the corner of our tiny living room that serves as her temporary studio, humming along to music with paint in her hair. She catches me watching and smiles, the kind of smile that lights up her whole face. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. "How that dinner changed everything," I say. "How scared I was. How worth it this has all been." She crosses the room and kisses me, tasting like coffee and morning and possibility. "No more secrets," she says. No more secrets, I agree. If you've ever had to choose between the life you were supposed to want and the love that actually makes you feel alive, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell me about the moment you decided to stop hiding. And if you're still hiding, know that it's terrifying to step into the light. But it's also the most freeing thing you'll ever do. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more real stories about choosing authenticity over expectations. Because next time I'll be sharing what happened when I ran into Richard 6 months later, and what he said that I never expected. This story isn't over, it's just beginning.